All right, listener name, ready to tackle procrastination. We're going deep today with Giovanni Rear's audiobook, Pare de procrastinar, supere a preguiça e conquiste seus objetivos. It's got 50 habits to break the cycle. But first, got to understand why we fall into this trap.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's easy to think it's just laziness, but it's way more than that. Really, it's about how our self-control and motivation kind of work together.
So more than just hitting snooze too many times, huh?
Oh, yeah. Way more. It's like a mental tug of war.
Okay.
One side is us wanting to reach our goals, and then the other side has all these things pulling us towards procrastination.
Okay.
And those things can be demotivating or hindering.
Break it down for me.
So demotivating factors are things like anxieties and fear of failure. They just zap your energy to even start.
Right.
And hindering factors are like mental exhaustion or distractions. They chip away at your self-control. Even if you're motivated at first, it gets harder to stay on track.
So it's like a flat tire A&D, a sputtering engine.
Yeah, basically.
No wonder we get stuck. The audiobook also mentions these 5 big fears that fuel procrastination. Did any of those stand out to you?
Well, they're all super common, which is why they're worth talking about. I mean, we have fear of failure, but also fear of success. Maybe the change it brings is scary. Then there's perfectionism, self-handicapping.
Wait, self-handicapping, that's like setting yourself up to fail so you have an excuse.
Exactly. And it happens a lot. Think about times you put off studying for a test.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't study and you fail, well, you had a reason. But if you do go study and fail, it feels way worse.
I see what you mean. It's like subconsciously protecting your ego. Do you think people realize these fears are behind their procrastination?
They're often hidden, but by looking at them, we start to see our own patterns better. And listener name, remember, even super successful people have these fears. They've just learned to act anyway.
So it's not just me hiding from deadlines then?
Nope. And that's what's great about the audiobook. It gives you tools to understand and overcome these fears.
Which brings us to the fun part. It calls them the 7 excuses of procrastination. I'm definitely guilty of a few.
Oh, we all are. It's human nature to avoid things that are uncomfortable. These excuses are just ways to protect us from those 5 big fears.
Okay, let's see if these sound familiar. Listener name, it's not important, I need more information, I don't have time.
Yeah.
Classics. Or how about, I'm too busy, I'll do it later. Or forgot. Oh, and my favorite, I'm not in the mood.
That last one is a popular one, but here's the thing. You have to recognize them for what they are. Just ways to avoid stuff.
So first step is admitting you have a problem.
Exactly. Awareness is how you start to change. The book doesn't just list excuses, though. It gives you antidotes, actions, and ways to think differently to fight each one. It's about taking control instead of letting those excuses control you.
All right, so we've got the fears and the excuses. Now for the good stuff, action. The audiobook has a ton of strategies to break free from procrastination. It's not all about willpower, though, right?
No, definitely not. It's more about understanding how our minds work and using that to help us. The audiobook gives us a bunch of anti-procrastination techniques. Some are behavioral, some are cognitive.
So it's like retraining our brains to work with us.
That's it. We learn how our minds work and then use specific things to change our thinking and our actions.
Before we get into the techniques, though, the audiobook really talks about living a disciplined life to beat procrastination. But discipline sounds like a chore. How can we change how we see that?
I'm glad you brought that up. The book says discipline doesn't have to be strict and no fun. It can be about setting things up to reach our goals and actually feel less stressed. It's like building a plan for success.
So instead of discipline being the enemy, it's a tool.
Exactly. One way to build this is with routines. I know routines sound boring, but the right ones can be super powerful.
Okay, so instead of hating routines, we can see them as setting us up for success. It's like having a playbook so you don't waste energy on every little decision.
That's the idea. And that extra energy can go towards actually finishing things and reaching your goals. Another big part of this discipline plan is managing your energy. The book talks about healthy habits like enough sleep.
Oh yeah, that's a big one for me. When I don't sleep enough, I procrastinate like crazy. It's like my brain is running on empty.
Makes sense. When you're tired, stressed, or haven't eaten well, your willpower is gone and those procrastination urges take over.
So it's not just about managing time, but also energy and how we feel.
Right. And that connects to minimizing distractions. Having a space where you can focus and do deep work is really important. It's like setting yourself up to succeed.
So that's where things like no phone, no extra tabs, a quiet space come in.
Yeah. You're making it easier to stay on track, harder to get pulled away. Now, along with discipline, the book also talks about self-compassion. We forget that a lot when we're trying to be productive.
Okay, that's interesting. I always thought tough love was the way to beat procrastination, not being nice to myself. How does self-compassion help?
It's super important. Think about it. When we're mean to ourselves for procrastinating, it just makes us feel worse. Self-compassion is treating yourself like you'd treat a friend who's having the same problem.
So instead of making the self-criticism worse, we're trying to be understanding.
Yeah, it's a better way to do it. It's not about ignoring the problem. It's about being nicer to yourself so you can grow instead of feeling ashamed.
That's a good way to look at it. Listening aim. How do you talk to yourself when you procrastinate? Are you supportive or you mean?
That little voice in your head can make a big difference in how motivated you are and how you deal with setbacks. Speaking of motivation, the book says role models can help us beat procrastination.
Role models. So like finding someone who gets things done and copying them.
Not exactly copying, but being inspired by them. Seeing what's possible. The book says find people who have done what you want to do. They show you it can be done.
So if I want to write a book, I should find a successful author and learn from them. It's like having a mentor even if they don't know me.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be someone famous. It could be a friend, family, or someone you follow online.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's like having a real example that your goals can happen.
Right. And it connects to something else the audiobook talks about, making your goals clear.
Okay, clarifying goals.
Yeah.
It sounds basic, but I bet there's more to it than just writing a to-do list.
There is. You have to make sure the goals you're working towards are things you actually care about. When we're not excited about our goals, it's so easy to procrastinate. It's like trying to climb a mountain when you don't even want to get to the top.
So it's not just having goals, but having the right goals, the ones that fit with who we are and what we want.
Exactly. So, listener name, think about your goals. Do they still make you excited? Do they fit with who you are and what you want to do? Or do they just feel like things you have to do?
If your goals aren't making you happy, maybe it's time for some new ones.
That's a great point.
Because when you're working towards something you really care about, it's so much easier to stop procrastinating. It's not a chore anymore. It's a step towards something you want. We've covered a lot here, from discipline and self-compassion to role models and finding the right goals. What are some key takeaways before we get into specific techniques in part 3?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is to remember that overcoming procrastination isn't about suddenly becoming super productive. It's more about making small changes over time and celebrating those small wins. That's what keeps us going.
Yeah, progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
And like you said before, it's not about forcing ourselves with willpower either.
Right. It's about figuring out why we procrastinate, those fears or ways of thinking, or even just our surroundings, and then finding the right tools and strategies to deal with them.
And the audiobook has a ton of those 50 techniques is a lot. But I want to hear about some specifics. Where should we start?
Let's go back to something we mentioned, breaking tasks down into smaller steps. Sounds simple, but it really helps when you're feeling overwhelmed, which is what often makes us procrastinate.
I've definitely been there. Sometimes I look at my to-do list and just want to hide.
It's like trying to climb a mountain all at once. But if you break it down, even something small like spend 15 minutes making an outline, it doesn't feel so impossible.
It's like, how do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time.
Exactly. And finishing each small step makes you feel good, so it's easier to keep going.
Right.
That reminds me of the Eisenhower matrix. We talked about it earlier. I've heard of it, but never really got how to use it. Can you explain it for our listener?
Of course. It's great for figuring out what to do first. You have 4 boxes, things that are urgent and important, things that are important but not urgent but not important, and then things that are neither.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could be helpful. So instead of having one huge list where everything feels important, we can put things in categories and focus on what really matters first.
That's the idea. It helps you see clearly and not get stuck doing things that keep you busy but aren't that important.
So it's a way to decide what to do first.
Yeah.
A way to procrastinate strategically.
That's awesome.
You could say that. Now, another technique from the book is to make a special workspace for yourself. You mean not working from the couch or bed? Yeah, I do that all the time.
It's easy to work from anywhere these days. But having a spot just for work tells your brain it's time to focus. It separates work time from relaxed time.
Like putting on your work clothes, even if it's just in your head. I get how that could help you get in the right mindset. And speaking of work, the audiobook talks about realistic deadlines.
Yes, those are so important. When we make deadlines we can't meet, we're setting ourselves up to fail. And that just makes us procrastinate more.
It's like we're expecting to fail before we even start.
Exactly. And that makes us want to avoid it all. It's better to break big projects down into smaller parts with deadlines for each part. That way you feel good about what you've done and want to keep going.
And talking about feeling good, One of the techniques that stood out to me was rewarding yourself for finishing tasks. It feels kind of like I'm spoiling myself. Shouldn't it be enough to just feel good about getting things done?
That's what a lot of people think. But our brains love rewards, even little ones. They help us do things more. It's not about being selfish. It's about making yourself feel good when you're productive.
So we're training our brains to want that feeling of accomplishment.
Right. And the rewards don't have to be big or expensive. It could be having a cup of tea listening to music or going for a walk.
I like that. It's about making those little wins feel even better. And while we're on the topic of feeling good, the audiobook also talks about positive self-talk. I know I've been really hard on myself when I procrastinate.
It's easy to be critical. But the good thing is we can change those negative thoughts and think more positive things. It's not about pretending things are okay. It's about changing how we see things.
So instead of saying, I'm so lazy for putting this off again, we could say, okay, I messed up, but I'm going to try again and learn from it.
That's it. It's about being your own cheerleader, not your own worst enemy. It takes time. But you can learn to talk to yourself in a more encouraging way.
This is making me realize how much how we think affects procrastination. It's not just about techniques. It's about making your mind a good place to work.
You're right. And one way to get support from outside is to find an accountability partner, someone to tell your goals to and who will check in with you.
I've heard of that, but I've always felt kind of weird about it. Like, I'm admitting I can't do it on my own.
I get that.
Yeah.
But think of it as working together. It's having someone on your side to cheer you on and help you stay focused. It can really help when you feel like procrastinating.
Yeah, having someone to support you could make a big difference. It's like a personal trainer for your to-do list.
Exactly. Now, before we finish up, there's one last technique I want to talk about. The audiobook calls it just starting. It sounds too easy to be true, but it works.
Just starting, so just do the first little thing.
Our brains often think tasks are harder or more annoying than they actually are, and that makes us procrastinate. But once we start, we usually realize it's not so bad.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll worry about something for hours, and then when I finally start doing it, it's not that bad.
That's how it works. The hardest part is starting. So set a timer for even just 5 minutes and work on the task for that long. You might surprise yourself with how much you get done once you start.
I like that. It reminds me that even small steps can make a big difference. This has been a great deep dive. I feel like I understand procrastination better now, and I have a lot of new things to try.
And remember, the important thing is to find what works for you and to be patient. Try things out, see what happens, and don't be afraid to change your plan if you need to.
So, listener name, as we wrap up this deep dive, we want you to think about this. What if instead of thinking discipline is the opposite of fun, we found ways to make it feel good and maybe even enjoyable? That's something to think about on your own. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, happy tackling.